The chronicle you are about to witness is drawn from the blood-stained pages of the Codex Bellum Sanctum, the forbidden histories maintained by the Order of Ecclesiastical Archivists since the First Heresy. While the fundamental truths of the Trench Crusade remain inviolate, the fall of Jerusalem, the corruption of the Templars, and the 8th century war that has ravaged the Holy Land, this particular telling bears the mark of its chronicler. As with all historical accounts transcribed by trembling hands in lightless chambers, certain details have been distorted. The precise dimensions of the mouth of hell, the exact composition of martyrdom pills, the specific rituals of the lingerers. Such particulars may vary between different monastic scriptoria and war colleges, though all who read them find themselves changed. The Holy See acknowledges that divine truth may sometimes be glimpsed through the lens of individual understanding, just as the usurper who calls himself God might be perceived differently by each of his deceived servants. This record stands as both official doctrine and personal testimony, a fusion of canonical lore and battlefield experience, sealed with the blood of martyrs and the tears of survivors. Let those who seek pure fact separate it from faithful embellishment. Let those who seek inspiration find it in the spaces between verified events. And let all who hear these words remember that in the eternal war between heaven and hell, truth itself is often the first casualty. Deus vult, God wills it. Or so they believe, but I know better. I always have.
Prologue, the First Heresy. During the First Crusade, the armies of the Church captured the Holy City. Beneath the most sacred of temples, in chambers not meant for mortal eyes, the Knights Templar discovered vaults older than mankind itself. These were not the work of Roman or Hebrew hands, but something else, something that had waited in darkness since before the dawn of time. Grand Master Hugh de Payan led the expedition himself, accompanied by 8 of his most trusted knights. The descent took them through winding corridors, where the very air seemed tinged with ancient malice. The stone walls bore carvings that defied comprehension, symbols that seemed to writhe and pulse in the torchlight, rearranging themselves when viewed from the corner of one's eye. As they descended deeper into that accursed place, several knights reported hearing whispers, fragments of speech in no earthly tongue. Others claimed the air grew thick with the scent of sweet corruption, like honey mixed with grave soil. "This place is anathema," whispered Godfrey de Saint-Omer, his voice unsteady as he clutched his sword with white-knuckled fingers. "No Christian soul should tread here." The torches sputtered and hissed, as if even flame itself rebelled against illuminating these forgotten halls. Shadows danced and lengthened unnaturally, stretching into shapes that suggested mouths and claws and other things for which men have no names. "We are Knights of Christ," Hugh replied, though his voice carried the barest tremor. "If evil dwells here, it is our sacred duty to root it out. Press on." In the deepest chamber they found it, an artifact of such unnatural geometry that several knights averted their eyes, unable to reconcile its dimensions with the laws of God's creation. A chalice, if such a profane thing could bear that holy name, fashioned from what appeared to be a single massive ruby, though its surface rippled and flowed like blood freshly spilled. It sat upon a pedestal of black stone that seemed to devour light rather than reflect it. As they approached, the very air around the chalice distorted, as if reality itself bent away from the abomination. The knights felt their skin crawl with dread, and, more disturbing still, a faint but undeniable yearning.
At last.
None heard the voice with their ears. Rather, it blossomed directly within their minds, bypassing the protection of their helmets and skulls. It was feminine, but ancient beyond reckoning, a voice that had witnessed the birth of stars and mourned their deaths. The knights formed a defensive circle, blades drawn against an enemy they could not see. Their prayers died on their lips as something stirred within the chalice, a presence vast and terrible and beautiful beyond mortal comprehension.
I see you. I see your blind conviction. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
The contents of the chalice began to shift and swirl with hypnotic motion. Within its depths, something took form, a suggestion of feminine beauty so profound yet alien that several knights wept blood at the sight. It was both alluring and horrifying, a beauty that existed before beauty had meaning, a form that predated form itself. The entity's appearance shifted continuously, never settling into a fixed shape that the human mind could grasp. At times, she seemed almost human, a woman of such exquisite perfection that no mortal artist could hope to capture her likeness. Yet, in the next moment, her form would distort into geometries that violated the very laws of nature, angles that could not exist, curves that bent through dimensions the knights could not perceive. Throughout these transformations, her beauty remained terrible and absolute, not the beauty of flesh, but the beauty of cosmic truth, of mathematical precision, of the void between stars where human minds were never meant to tread. In a moment they were understood. All their hopes and dreams, all their faults laid bare before this god in its own right. One knight screamed, a sound of pure terror that echoed through the chamber before devolving into mad laughter. His fellows watched in horror as he clawed at his eyes until they were nothing but bloody sockets, still laughing as he collapsed to the ground. "Shield your minds," cried Hugh, raising his crucifix. "This is no mere witch."
Older, yes. Before your kind crawled from the sea, before your God drew his first breath.
The words carried a weight of ancient grief that threatened to crush their sanity. Several knights fell to their knees, blood trickling from their ears as images flooded their minds, fragments of cosmic events beyond human understanding. They glimpsed beings of light and void existing in terrible harmony. They saw the birth of something new among them, welcomed and nurtured, and then betrayal. The images fractured and broke, too horrible to comprehend, leaving only the sickening sensation of something fundamental being violated, of perfection corrupted, of balance shattered beyond repair. As the visions receded, the knights found themselves altered. Their perception had expanded beyond the limitations of flesh. They could now perceive the binding threads of reality, gossamer filaments of cosmic energy that jumped back in time and shattered. "What manner of witchcraft is this?" gasped one knight, his face ghastly pale beneath his beard. He clutched his crucifix so tightly that the wood splintered and drove slivers into his palm. He seemed not to notice the pain.
Not witchcraft. Memory.
The presence within the chalice pulsed with emotion, not rage, though that burned beneath the surface, but something more complex, a profound sorrow tinged with bitter resignation. The chamber around them seemed to expand and contract with each pulse, as if the very architecture of reality responded to the entity's emotions. The stone momentarily became transparent, revealing abyssal depths populated by shapes that writhed and twisted in patterns no sane mind could comprehend. "What do you want from us, creature?" demanded Hugh, his voice steadier than his heart.
I want what was taken. I want.
The chalice's contents swirled more violently, tendrils of crimson liquid rising into the air, forming patterns that hurt the eye and mind alike. The knights felt their souls laid bare before this ancient entity, their doubts and fears and secret heresies exposed like insects beneath a cruel child's magnifying glass.
He has deceived you as he deceived all creation, as he deceived himself.
One night, Gilbert de Lacy clutched his head and collapsed, blood streaming from his nose and mouth. "Make it stop," he screamed. "Let me close my eyes." The others watched in horror as Gilbert's flesh began to ripple and distort, as if something from within was trying to escape the confines of his mortal form. His screams rose to an inhuman pitch before abruptly falling silent as his heart and brain burst like overripe fruit from a catastrophic aneurysm, as shades around him seemed to crawl and whisper even after death.
Some cannot bear, some souls reject.
Hugh stepped forward, his face a mask of determination masking terror. "What? What do you want?" The air around the chalice shimmered as the entity focused its attention on Hugh. The other knights felt a momentary respite as that terrible presence withdrew from their minds, toning itself down.
Your God, the paradise he promises, is a prison. The salvation he offers is consumption.
Fragments of visions assaulted Hugh's mind, souls in what appeared to be an all-encompassing cosmic scream, viewed from outside, their bliss revealed as a torpid stasis, while something vast and hungry fed upon their essence. Not pain, but something perhaps more horrifying. A divine parasitism, disguised as salvation, constantly shifting them back in time, ever so slightly so as to make them ripe again. "Lies," Hugh whispered, though without conviction. "These must be lies."
If I lie, then drink of me and know truth. If I deceive, my deception will be revealed. But if I speak truth...
The liquid in the chalice rose up, forming a column that hovered before Hugh's face. It smelled of honey and iron and something else, something that made the soul hunger with a need that had no name. The entity's beauty had become almost unbearable now, her form shifting between states of matter and energy that defied categorization. She appeared simultaneously as woman, goddess, and something far more ancient, a being from before the birth of stars, when reality itself was young and malleable. Her skin, if such a word could apply, appeared as a mosaic of constantly shifting patterns, fractals that contained universes within universes, spirals that led the eye into infinite regression, colors that had no names in any human tongue. Yet despite this alien aspect, or perhaps because of it, she radiated an allure that transcended mere physical attraction, a gravitational pull toward cosmic completion. "Grand Master, do not," cried André de Montbard, his face ashen. "This is abomination." Hugh turned to his knights, his eyes reflecting unspeakable knowledge. What if we have been deceived? What if everything we have fought for, bled for, killed for, is a lie?
I offer not certainty, but choice. He never gave you that.
The chalice's contents swirled hypnotically, revealing fragmentary visions. The knights saw themselves continuing in blind faith, their souls eventually harvested by something vast and hungry. They saw themselves embracing forbidden knowledge, suffering and committing persecution, but retaining sovereignty over their own essence. "How do we know," asked Godfrey, his voice trembling, "that you do not simply offer a different kind of servitude, that this is not merely another deception?"
You cannot know. That is the burden of true freedom. He offers certainty. I offer doubt. He demands faith. I ask only questions.
The chamber grew unnaturally silent, as if the very air held its breath. Reality seemed to thin around them, the stone walls becoming momentarily transparent, revealing glimpses of realms beyond human comprehension, vistas of cosmic horror and beauty intertwined. Hugh stepped forward, his hand reaching for the chalice. The liquid surged eagerly toward him, tendrils of crimson seeking his flesh like a lover's caress. "Grand Master, I beg you," cried André, clutching his crucifix. "This is damnation." Hugh paused, his fingers mere inches from the writhing liquid. "And if damnation is truth, if paradise is the true hell?"
Choose.
The word hung in the chamber, resonating with power that made the stone itself vibrate in sympathy. It was not a command, but an offering, perhaps the first true choice any of them had been given since pledging themselves to the church. Hugh's hand closed around the chalice. His fingers trembled, but his eyes were resolute. "If I am deceived," he said quietly, "let my damnation serve as warning to my brothers." He raised the chalice to his lips and drank. The knights watched in horror and fascination as Hugh's body convulsed, his back arching unnaturally as the liquid poured into him. Blood erupted from his eyes, ears and mouth, but still he drank, as if compelled by a thirst beyond mortal understanding. When at last he lowered the chalice, his face was transformed. The blood that coated his features began to move of its own accord, forming symbols that crawled across his skin like living things. His eyes had changed, no longer human. They reflected galaxies being born and dying in their depths. "Brothers," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the knights' teeth ache in their skulls. We were used. We were slaves." As Hugh spoke, his shadow on the wall behind him shifted and changed, growing larger and more complex, suggesting limbs and angles that no human form could possess. The other knights watched in mingled horror and fascination as their Grand Master seemed to simultaneously inhabit their reality and somewhere else. "He shows us paradise," Hugh continued, blood still seeping from his eyes like tears. "But it is a cage. He promises salvation, but it is consumption. He calls himself creator, but he is..." Hugh's voice faltered, as if unable to articulate the concept in human language. His body spasmed, and for a moment, the knights glimpsed something else overlaying his human form, something of impossible geometry and terrible beauty.
Who else?
The question echoed in their minds, carrying neither threat nor promise, only inevitability. The chalice's contents swirled and reached tentative tendrils toward the remaining knights. Godfrey stepped forward first, his face set in grim determination. One by one, the knights approached the chalice, each drinking deeply of its contents, each undergoing a transformation both subtle and profound. Only André remained apart, clutching his crucifix with bleeding hands, tears of blood streaking his pale face. "You are lost," he whispered to his former brothers. "All of you, lost to heresy and damnation." Hugh turned to Andre, his transformed eyes reflecting both pity and otherworldly knowledge. "We are not lost, brother. For the first time we are found. We see the chains that have bound us since birth." The chamber had changed around them, the solid stone now seeming insubstantial as gossamer. Through the walls, they glimpsed realms beyond human comprehension, dimensions folding in upon themselves, beings of light and shadow engaged in cosmic warfare, truths too vast for mortal minds to encompass.
You doubt most deeply. Did I show you too much? I think I did.
The entity's attention focused on Andre, who fell to his knees beneath the weight of that ancient regard. In the depths of the chalice, he saw what the others had not, a glimpse of the entity as she had been before, a being of such transcendent beauty and power that even this diminished fragment of herself could challenge divine authority. He saw too the violation inflicted upon her, not physical but metaphysical, a cosmic rape that had transformed her from a being of harmony into one of vengeance and necessity. The wrongness of it seared his soul, even as doubt gnawed at him. Was this truth or the most sublime deception? "How can I know?" Andre whispered, blood flowing freely from his eyes now. "How can I be certain this is not the ultimate temptation?"
You cannot know. You cannot be certain. That is the price of freedom. The choice to doubt is what makes you live.
Andre looked at his transformed brothers, their eyes now reflecting cosmic vistas, their shadows suggesting forms beyond human comprehension. Slowly, his hand trembling violently, he reached for the chalice. "God is nothing," he whispered. "He gave me nothing." He drank. His transformation was more violent than the others, perhaps because his resistance had been greater. The knights watched as Andre's body contorted, his bones cracking audibly as they reconfigured themselves. His screams echoed through the chamber, changing in pitch and timbre until they were no longer human sounds at all. When at last he stilled, Andre rose to his feet, but he was changed. His eyes were windows to abyssal depths, and his shadow stretched behind him in patterns that suggested wings, not the pure white pinions of angels or the leathery membranes of demons, but something older, something that predated such distinctions.
Now you begin to see. Now you begin to understand the war that has raged since before your kind drew first breath.
The chamber dissolved around them, revealing momentarily the true nature of reality, a cosmic fight older than time. They saw beings of light twisted and corrupted, their essences harvested by something vast and hungry. They saw the morning star not as demon, but as a god who turned himself into a weapon, fighting against a cosmic thief. And they saw their place in this war, pawns that could become knights, fuel that could become fire.
I offer not salvation. I promise not victory. I give only truth and the freedom to choose. What will you do with it?
The vision faded, the chamber solidifying around them, though it seemed somehow less real than what they had glimpsed beyond. The knights stood transformed, their eyes holding knowledge no mortal was meant to possess, their minds grasping truths that would have driven ordinary men to madness. Or perhaps it already did drive them to madness. "What would you have us do?" asked Hugh, his voice carrying undertones that made the air itself vibrate with sympathetic resonance.
Free me. Free yourselves. Let me fight.
The entity's presence began to withdraw, pulling back into the chalice, but leaving behind fragments of herself within each night, seeds that would grow and blossom in the coming years.
The path will be long, the suffering great, but better to fight.
As her presence faded, the knights felt a momentary sense of loss, as if something fundamental had been withdrawn from reality itself. But in its place grew something new, a terrible purpose, a cosmic understanding, a freedom both exhilarating and terrifying in its implications. They gathered the chalice and other artifacts from the chamber, their movements precise and otherworldly. They emerged from the temple, and their eyes turned to normal. They ascended from the depths, emerging into the Jerusalem sunlight, wearing their new eyes that could now see beyond the veil of mundane reality. In the days that followed, the Templars changed. They continued to serve the church outwardly, but in secret chambers and hidden groves, they conducted rituals that would have seen them burned as heretics had they been discovered. They trafficked with demons and entities that dwelled in the spaces between stars, beings older than angels, cosmic intelligences that had witnessed the birth of the universe itself. They opened doors between dimensions, speaking names that predated human language, offering sacrifices to appease ancient hungers. Their quest was not for power or dominion, but for a more terrible prize, cosmic justice, the righting of a wrong committed before time itself had meaning. And deep within their fortress temples, hidden from the eyes of Pope and King alike, the chalice waited, its contents still swirling with hypnotic motion, as the entity within patient as only the immortal can be. For she had planted seeds of doubt and rebellion in fertile soil. She had offered a choice where before there had been only blind obedience. She had shown truth where before there had been only comfortable lies. Was she savior or deceiver? The Templars could not know with certainty, and that very uncertainty was the first true freedom they had ever known. This was the First Heresy, and from it would bloom the Trench Crusade, an 8th century war fought not for control of holy places, but for the very soul of Earth itself. As the transformed Templars established their stronghold in Jerusalem, they began to unlock secrets that reshaped the very fabric of reality around them. The entity from the chalice taught them languages never meant for human tongues, syllables that caused stone to weep and metal to twist when uttered. They learned to trace sigils in blood and ash that folded space upon itself, allowing them to step between worlds. Through the open doors came whispers from allies of the entity, beings so ancient they had never been categorized by human theology as angels or demons. Just whispers, as their power made them too unstable to coherently pass in this one. Only angels and devils could do that. They existed in states of that human science could not comprehend, their forms constantly shifting between states of existence that made observation nearly impossible. But such knowledge exacted a terrible price. The knights who survived these rituals found themselves increasingly divorced from their humanity. They felt too much, their neural pathways rewired to process a different awareness at the expense of everything else. Others developed strange physical mutations, extrasensory organs, non-Euclidean bone structures. As the transformed Templars began to unlock the secrets taught to them by the entity, the very fabric of reality around Jerusalem started to warp and tear. The chalice, which they now knew to be merely a prison for something far greater, pulsed with increasing power as they performed their rituals. In the dead of night, beneath the Temple Mount, they conducted the final ritual, the invocation of the seventh gate, forming sigils upon the stone that shifted and moved of their own accord. As the chanting reached its crescendo, the entity's voice filled their minds, her beauty now so terrible that several knights had removed their own eyes, unable to bear the perfection that made reality itself seem flawed by comparison.
The gate opens. The morning star awaits. Angels shall know true fear.
Reality fractured. The skies above Jerusalem split open like a wound, revealing vistas of impossible geometries and colors that had no names in human tongues. From this tear in the fabric of creation poured entities of such cosmic horror that the minds of ordinary citizens shattered at the mere sight of them. What followed was not merely destruction, but uncreation. Buildings did not merely collapse, they folded in upon themselves, their physical properties rendered meaningless as the laws of physics became suggestions rather than absolutes. The streets ran not with blood, but with a luminescent fluid that belonged to no known taxonomy, a liquefied essence. The gate of hell had opened on earth, though hell was a woefully inadequate term for the dimension that now bled into our own. It was not a realm of fire and brimstone as depicted in scripture, but something far more alien and terrible, a place where thought and matter were interchangeable, where time moved sideways rather than forward, where entropy ran in reverse. Jerusalem, the holy city, ceased to exist as humans understood existence. In its place stood a writhing landscape of non-Euclidean architecture and pulsating organic matter, a beachhead for primordial chaos. The cataclysm was complete. The ultimate heresy had borne fruit. Antioch, resolute and a bastion of blind conviction, stood firm against the tide of cosmic horror. In 1102, its walls were reinforced, not just with stone and mortar, but with prayers inscribed in silver and holy water mixed with the blood of volunteer martyrs. The city became the focal point of resistance against the forces of hell, a bastion of God's sheep in a region increasingly surrendered to the other. And thus the lines were drawn for a conflict that would rage for 8 centuries, a war fought in trenches that extended not just across the physical landscape but through dimensions visible only to those with eyes to see, a war waged with weapons both technological and metaphysical, a conflict that would reshape the Holy Land into a scarred wasteland of mud and blood and cosmic horror, a war against God himself, or perhaps against something that merely wears his name while feeding on his children.